Now that you've opened Figma and are on the design home screen, essentially, there's a few very important ground rules to keep in mind. Number one, we're never going to use pages. So on the left here, you can add new pages. Do not do that. We are always going to stay on page number one. I'm not going to explain why. It's kind of a weird naming scheme that Figma is using here because these are actually different projects. Just stay on page one. So this is a ground rule you have to keep in mind. You always want to be on page one. And then the next kind of ground rule for Figma is pretty much everything happens inside of a frame. When I say frame, I mean something like a picture frame. And there's a toolbar at the bottom here. And the second item in there is called frame. Or also you can press the keyboard button F, which I usually do. That's where most of your work is done. So you always need to have a frame. You don't paint anything outside of frames because that stuff is just not usable. If you want to make something useful or usable, it has to be inside of a frame. So that's the ground rule number 2. Always use a frame. So when I press the F key on my keyboard or select this at the bottom, a thing opens up on the right. Basically a list of predefined phones that I can use. We are going to use iPhone 17 for most of our cases. So just double click on iPhone 17 and a new frame appears in the middle of your screen. And by frame, once again, I mean something like a container. This will contain your work now. This is one screen of your design. And this is the frame. So let's say I want to have another frame because one screen is not enough. So I'll press F again or select the tool at the bottom, whatever you want to do. And then the list appears on the right. I double click on iPhone 17 and I have my second screen. So I already have 2 screens now that I can work with. I'm still in the design phase of my screen design, essentially, of my prototype. I'm still in the design phase, which I also see on the right panel here. I am in design, not in prototype. I'm in design. So this is how you essentially create a frame. And once you've created a frame, you can start filling up the frame with content. For instance, at the bottom here, I could say, I want to add a text field. So I add a text, I drag it over there and I can say, hello. Now this is way too small for my screen, so I just select it again. And on the right panel, if you search long enough, there will be something called typography. And here you can change the font size. I'm sure the more you experiment with stuff on the right panel here, the more you will find that it's actually quite easy to figure out. But it's something you have to get used to. So I've created a text field now. And let's say I also want to have a button at the bottom here. So I just draw a rectangle. I selected rectangle here and just made a simple rectangle. Now I need to add some text. So I click text again. I'll do this outside. The text maybe says reserve spot. That's what I want. So I drag this over to my little makeshift button here. It's way too big, so maybe I'll change the text size and make it a bit more reasonable, or I want to make it a little bit more bold. And this is kind of my button now. Like in most other design programs, you could actually select both items. Now I've selected both, which you see on the left here as well. And I could right click and then say group selection if I want that. Now they move as a group and not as individual items, but you don't have to do that. Now, so kind of I have essentially created a basic screen. It says hello, and I can do one thing here, but there's nothing happening on this spot. So what if I start using the second screen? Let's say, welcome to the second screen. I copy and paste my button over. I have to move it over. That's kind of a weird thing, as you see, because everything is caught inside of the frame as I move it around. And only if I keep dragging it, eventually realizes it wants to get out of the frame and then reappears in the new frame. This is kind of a weird concept, but you have to get used to this. Everything is happening inside of frames. You also see those frames on the left here. If you look at the layers, there's one frame and here's the other frame, and inside are these components. So we're on the second screen now. I've added some text. I want to change the button now. So I double click a couple of times until I get to the text box, and now I can say, well, go back. So that would be an extremely simple app. I want to go from the first screen to the second screen, and I want to be able to go back. At this point, nothing is interactive. So that means at this point, nothing will be moving. You're just in the design phase of your little app design. Just in case you want to zoom out, because everything feels a little bit tight here, on the Mac, you can sometimes use the trackpad. Or on a Windows Surface device, for instance, or on a tablet, just use the pinch motion with your fingers to zoom in and zoom out. But on most other computers, you can use and press the Control key or STRG key on a German keyboard. So press that key and then start rolling with your mouse wheel, and it's going to zoom in and zoom out. Or you could also go to the right where we have a percentage here, so that's the zoom percentage. I could zoom in or zoom out or zoom to fit, for instance. So in this case, you kind of know how to move around now. You could also use and press the space bar, which I do right now. Then the cursor changes into a hand and I can drag this around. So space bar and then just dragging it around. Good, but that's how you move around your designs. In our case, we only have 2 screens here. So that means to make them interactive now, I need to go into prototyping mode. I'm still in my design phase, but I want to go to prototyping. So I click the button on the top right that says prototype. And now, to make things clickable, once again, I have to put them inside of another frame. So at this point, I only have these big frames here, which represent the screen of a phone. But I want to make sure that this button now also becomes part of a frame. So what I would typically do is I hit the F key or select the frame tool at the bottom, and then I draw a frame around the button like this. And now there's a frame around this button, and you'll know that you've done the correct framing here when you move your mouse around and you see these little circles appear at the top, on the right, bottom, and on the left. It doesn't matter which one of these you click on. You can use any one of these. They all do the same thing. Typically, and the reason why there's more circles in there is sometimes you have to go into multiple directions. So you can use a second one or a third one if you need to. But the idea really is just use any one of these circles, and once you click on it, you can drag a line, as you see. On this line, you can point to whichever screen you want to move to. We're still on the first screen here, on the hello screen, and now I'm gonna point it and drag it over to the second screen. It snaps, and now I let go. And as soon as I let go, this little sort of box shows up. And that box basically says, well, you trigger on tap, so if someone taps on this reserve spot button, the action will be navigate to, and then I can say the destination, which in my case is the second screen. All of this is already pre-selected, so I'm not changing anything here. I just click anywhere on the empty screen, and that's it. So now I have this tiny little sort of arrow over there. I'm gonna move that a little bit away so it becomes more obvious. I have this arrow, and once I click on the arrow, I can still sort of modify it. If I want to point it somewhere else, I can also delete it if I need to, using selecting it and then clicking the delete button on the keyboard. But that's pretty much it. So this should take me from the first screen to the next screen if I click on this button. But I also want to go back. So here I have a go back button. And now I could just quite simply click on the same circle again and drag an arrow over there to the first screen, and then that would work immediately and totally fine, as you see. But sometimes there's a case where you have one screen and then another screen and then another screen, and they all go to this one screen that has a go back button. So multiple sources go to one destination. And now if I click go back, how would it know where it just came from? It wouldn't know it came from the first screen or the third screen or whatever. And you want to make sure that if someone clicks go back, that they will be taken back to the original screen. So to do that, you kind of, let me delete this real quick. You will kind of take the button again, take one of these circles, and you can either point it at yourself, so on this screen, or use whatever other screen you want for a moment. This is just temporary. It just needs to point to something. Then let go. This little box shows up again. And now, and this is the trick essentially, you have to change the action. You don't want to navigate to a specific destination. You want to just go back. If I select back here, it changes. And now you see this little arrow becomes this weird little pointing at itself kind of symbol. And now you've changed the action on a tap on this button. It now simply goes back to wherever it came from. So that could be anywhere. But it will remember where it came from and then takes you back to that screen. So you don't have to specifically say to which screen you want to go back to. The system will automatically know. So that's the only sort of variation. In all other cases, you always just point at the screen that you want to go to. Good, so we've done this now. We've connected the screen over there. The go back button goes back to wherever it just came from, which in our case will be the first screen. And now you want to try this out. So I'll zoom out a little bit. There's a couple of ways to make that interactive now. You'll see a little thing called Flow or Flow 1 here with a play button next to it. You could just use that. So if I click on this, it will open up a screen that looks kind of like a phone. And it will show me the app. And if I click around just to test it, I kind of get an indication. I can only click at the thing at the bottom here. So I click on that, it takes me to the second screen, and now I click on go back and I'm back at the first screen. And this is how you wire up a prototype or make an interactive click dummy essentially. There's other ways if this doesn't work, because Figma sometimes doesn't work very well with these previews. So clicking on the flow icon is one way to preview this, but also on the very right, you have a play button at the top. And you could switch to present. If you do that, it opens a new tab and it should essentially show you the same kind of experience. Sometimes it doesn't work. It really depends on the computer, on the Figma account, and sometimes even the time of the day. So I'll leave this up to you to use either this little flow play icon here or just use the play icon at the top. You could also go into preview here, which is the same thing again that you had earlier by clicking on the flow icon. But this is how you preview it. And then when you're done with all your setups and making sure that your design is finished, you can share it. So if you click on share at the top right, you get this kind of screen. And now there's one thing you have to do, because if you share it with me by just using copy link at the top, I'm not going to be able to see it right away because I don't have the permission to see it, even though you shared the link. You have to change who has access to this file. So who has access? Only those invited. In your case, you click on it and then you say, no, I'm going to have allow access to anyone, which in this case means anyone who has this special link. And they can only view. That's totally fine. I don't have to edit. And that's pretty much it. Then you click save. And now who has access? Anyone. And at this point, you can just say copy link at the top. And if you copy that link, that's the one you're now going to send me on Teams or by chat or by email or whichever way you want. That is the link that I would kind of ask you to submit in your assignment. And that's pretty much how you make a click dummy or wireframe in Figma. I would kindly ask you to rewatch the video and look at the spots that might be confusing. If you need any help, or if there's anything else I can help you with, just reach out by chat and I will try to help you get this done.